Ghana had in the years after independence partnered international oil companies to search for hydrocarbons in its offshore basins. This was after seepages of oil had been discovered in the western part of Ghana in 1896. The search results were disappointing in those years until 1970, when Signal Amoco Consortium discovered the present-day Salt Pond oil fields at Salt Pond in the central region. Production started on this field, but due to the disappointing quantities of oil that was coming, Ghana did not consider it a significant find. But subsequently, that obviously gave governments after that discovery the reason to keep hopes alive that someday a better field will be discovered. The Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, was subsequently established in the 1980s to lead this charge for the search.
Ghana did not really have an operational company that was also involved alongside the foreign investors. Ghana only had data presented to it from the exploration activities and received by the Geological Survey Department. And Geological Survey Department, of course, did a good job of, maintaining the data records and so on. It was a creation of GNPC in 1983 by law, and then, GNPC became operational from 85. It was that which gave Ghana, so to speak, a seat at the table.
GNPC went to all lengths to try to convince companies to come in. And GNPC also did a lot of work in convincing Tullow, who were then interested only in the shallow water, to look into the deep water because of the belief that there could be commercial oil and gas accumulation in the deep water. As it turns out, the deep water is rather the savior of Ghana.
In August 2007, Cosmos and Tullow Oil announced the breakthrough Ghana has long been waiting for.
We're here to announce what we believe to be a fairly significant oil discovery, the Mahogany number 1. This is a very significant discovery. We have high expectations. We're extremely optimistic for where this is going to lead Ghana and certainly our country going forward.
In record time, the field was developed and first oil was ready for commissioning on Wednesday, December 15, 2010 by late President Mills, 3 years from discovery.
My brothers and sisters, today, Wednesday the 15th of December 2010 is a special day in the lives of Ghanaians. Today, we are pouring out our first oil from the Jubilee field. As we celebrate, let's ponder over the responsibilities that we have to assume. Let's ponder over what we have to do to help Mother Ghana build a better Ghana that we shall be proud of. Let us remember that those of us living now are trustees for the future generation. What are we going to leave the future generation?
The commissioning of first oil was not necessarily going to ensure the effective governance of Ghana's oil. We needed laws and regulations. 3 months after first oil, the Petroleum Revenues Management Act was passed by Ghana's parliament to do 2 things basically. Number 1, it was to prescribe how monies coming from the oil should be expended. And number 2,
when we discovered oil, citizens thought that on this occasion they couldn't leave the management and the use of oil revenues exclusively in the hands of technocrats and the political class. They did that in the case of gold, and nothing came out of it. So they determined that they wanted to be part of whatever arrangement that was to be put in place for the management and use of petroleum revenues.
The creation of a citizen-led committee known today as the Public Interest and Accountability Committee to monitor and account for how governments expend Ghana's oil monies. The monies that will come were to be disbursed in the manner following. Up to 55% of the carried and participation interest is given to the GMPC. Apart from this, all other petroleum revenues coming from other sources, such as ground rents, taxes, are all rounded up as 100%, and 70% of that is taken to the national budget. 21% will be set aside to cushion the budget in the event the monies we expect from the sale of oil does not come. The remaining 9% will be kept for the generation who will not meet oil production in Ghana. The other thing we had to do in order to get more revenues from oil activities happening in Ghana was to have a local content and local participation legislative instrument, the LI 2204, which will ensure that Ghanaians who want to do oil-related business will have the opportunity to do so. This regulation we successfully did in 2013. To govern the petroleum sector in a manner that ensures Ghana maximizes its returns, the law that oversees the licensing, exploration and production by oil companies, that is the PNDC Law 84, was reviewed and replaced in 2016. This Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, Act 919, streamlined and updated the upstream oil and gas operations by moving it from the traditional way of allocating oil blocks to oil companies, from the direct negotiations to competitive bidding. All these provisions were set in place to ensure that Ghana makes the best out of the oil. Today, the Jubilee Field, the Ten Field, and the Sankofa Ginyame Field are the fields producing oil and gas in Ghana. Apart from them, there are 17 other oil companies that are licensed to look for more oil for Ghana. Springfield Oil Company announced in 2020 of some huge find, but more work will have to be done before it comes on stream. The exploratory works on the Voltaire Basin by the GMPC are also progressing steadily after the 5-year initial exploration program came to an end in 2019. The GMPC hopes for the first time commercial quantities of hydrocarbons on land. How many barrels of oil have been produced since 2010 from Jubilee, 10 and the Sankofa Ginyame fields? Between November 2010 and June 2020, the total barrels of oil extracted from the Jubilee fields alone stands at 295 million barrels. 10 fields, since coming on stream 5 years ago in August 2016, has produced 70 million barrels of oil, and the Sankofa Ginyame fields, which came into production in May 2017, has since produced 41 million barrels of oil. In all, since 2010, Ghana has produced a total of 407 million barrels of oil, and it is from this that we get how much money has come to Ghana. So, how much money has come to Ghana from all these barrels of oil sold on the international market?
As at the first half of 2020, the country has actually received about $6.2 billion US. The Jubilee field alone has given us about 4.5 billion out of this 6.2 billion. The 10 field has given us about 898 million US. Then the Sankofa Ginyame field, it has also given us about 250 million US. Now, we also get some revenue from gas. The revenue we've accrued from gas so far is about 9.9 million Ghana cedis. So this is the composition of the 6.2 billion.
$6.2 billion cash. Nice. Let's have a fair appreciation of what $6.2 billion could do from Dr. Mantiao.
If you consider the fact that this country is in the process of mortgaging the Etiwa forest for just $2 billion, then of course $6 billion could have more than preserved Etiwa and all its natural environment and ecology. Again, if you consider the fact that we constructed the Kotoka International Airport Terminal 3 at a cost of $350 million, it means with about half the $6 billion that we've gotten so far, we could have built the Kotoka Terminal 3 in 10 of Ghana's regions. In fact, we can even build with the full amount a Terminal 3-like airport in all the 16 regions of Ghana. So this is the kind of amount that we are looking at.
So where is the money?
The PRMA provides how the money should be shared. GMPC receives its share, the Stabilization Fund receives its share, the Heritage Fund receives its share. But a chunk of this 6.2 has been expended through the national budget on various programs and projects. Some are regional in character, others are national in character. The regional ones are actually, if you come to the Greater Accra region, you have the Tema Pram Pram Road, that's an ABFA project. We have the Adenta Town Road, that's an ABFA project. If you go to the Ashanti region, we have the Sofoline Interchange, we have the Asokwa Interchange. If you go to the Bon Ahafo region, we have warehouses in Sunyai and Winchi. We have a dormitory block in the Doma Senior High School. If you go to the northern part of the country, because most of the economic activities center around agri-related projects, the money was actually expended. Chunk of that was expended in that part of the country on irrigation infrastructure. So in the Upper East, for instance, around Boko, there is a village known as Tamne. A dam has been constructed there and is still ongoing. If you come to Navrango areas, there is also an irrigation project there known as the Tono Dam. If you come to the western region, we have the Kasarodo bypass receiving some funding. We have the Enchi Asankragua Road receiving some funding. But as I mentioned earlier on, some of the projects are national in character that a particular region cannot lay claim to. Example is the Terminal 3 of the Kotoka International Airport. Another example is the Anomabo Fisheries College in the central region, the Atwabo Gas Processing Plant in the western region, the Kujokrum Takwa Rail Line in the western region. So these are the national projects. We also have the Free Senior High School project that's national in character. So these are some of the national projects that the ABFA has also gone to support.
Despite these projects, industry observers have raised concerns over how Ghana is spending its oil revenues.
There are some projects that have benefited from oil money in the past. Then the next year you realize that they are starved of money. For instance, the Anomabo Fisheries College is a very solid initiative. I think started far back as 2012 or so. It received some funding. Then at some point, the last time PIAC visited the school has not been completed, and is now looking for more money. At the time that some of the revenue that we got from the oil, which went into the ABFA, half has been reported, or a significant proportion of the money has been reported unutilized.
There have been also some allocations to financial institutions, and it's not too clear whether they were loans that will be paid back or they were just gifts. You're talking about Exim Bank and Maslock and the rest. Monies were doled out like peanuts.
It is hurting to know that you go to some communities and who are supposed to have benefited from oil revenue. You go to see the projects, and the projects are fast deteriorating soon after they be handed over.
After over 44,000 Ghana cedis was spent in renovating this laboratory belonging to the St. Francis Girls Senior High School here in Drapa, this is the state of the laboratory. The tops of the tables here at the lab have all come off, and the headmistress suspects a poor work.
Actually, the tables were poorly done because it didn't take long and it was folding up and cracking.
Again, there's also some 10 million cedis that was used to train people with disability in ICT. Because the project was not thought through properly, most of the beneficiaries could not set up and use the knowledge they've acquired, the skills they've acquired to N11, so they are all back in the streets. The bus branding saga, $3.6 million, which was just used to brand buses over a short period. There have been also other projects that cannot be identified, and there are a couple of them up north that PIAC went to inspect, but did not find those projects. There are a lot of them that, according to the Ministry of Finance, were used to finance projects that you go, and what you find is that they were rather used to pay outstanding debts on existing projects and all that. So it makes it really difficult for people to say with all conviction that indeed our oil revenue has inured to the social and economic benefits of this country.
Another concern is how GNPC uses its share of the oil revenues. Not long ago, traditional and social media were awash with stories on how the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation's Corporate Social Responsibility Wing, the GNPC Foundation, has been approached by institutions to sponsor festivals and derbers.
GNPC is gradually emerging as a pseudo government. GNPC has become the face for all kinds of projects in communities.
To impact lives. That's exactly what we are meant to do. Capacity building, it's one of the core areas we look at. And we do that through the empowerment unit, that's the economic empowerment unit.
The tendency is that people at the lower subnational levels are likely to perceive GNPC as the government. And if that happens, the potential is also that government can also renege on its core responsibilities of delivering development projects through the budget. GNPC is building all kinds of schools, which is good, but we think it has to be a bit targeted. Otherwise, what is the role of government? What is the Ministry of Education doing? What is the budget statement about education? How many schools do government want to build in a particular area? Is it GNPC doing it or is the government? So this understanding must be clear. Otherwise, we run into a system where we'll be running two governments, which has happened in other oil jurisdictions in some countries anyway, which is also an aspect of the resource case.
In the last decade, the debate over whether or not the monies set aside for generations who will meet no oil activity in Ghana, the Heritage Fund, should be expended or not, has resurfaced 3 times.
Wherever it is important to support the future development of this country, particularly when you talk about the youth is the future, heritage is the youth, we would make certain relevant amendments to make sure that the economy benefits from the Petroleum Act.
But fierce opposers of spending the Heritage Fund now also advance this argument.
If you do that arithmetic, you realize that out of the 100% that we get from oils, through what we get through the budget, if you add it to the stabilization fund, which is also accessible anyway, what is left for the future generation we are talking about is only 9. So 91 is already available for us. If you look at the arithmetic critically, you realize that the whole heritage fund that we are talking about, in nominal terms, is just 9 out of 100. Some countries do far more better than that. But of course, we understand our predicaments as a people, and we found oil, so we said, well, let us put this small portion into a future fund. So the first question you ask yourself, that if we have 91 available to us, and we think it's not sufficient, what do we think 9 will do as a state?
In all, between 2011 and first half of 2020, this is how the 6.2 billion has been expended among the receiving entities. The budget has so far received $2.50 billion. The Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, has also received $1.89 billion. The Ghana Stabilization Fund has received $1.32 billion. And the Ghana Heritage Fund has received $557.23 million. As these challenges discovered in the last 10 years of doing oil in Ghana continue to show their ugly heads, we sought to seek for ways in which they can be mitigated.
The framers of the law knew that oil revenue will not stay for too long. So in order to spend in a more focused way, you need a long-term national development plan. If this is lost on us, then it is also possible that probably if we don't even have the long-term national development plan, maybe the 4 areas we are choosing should be scaled down to 1 or 2. It's not binding that you should always have 4 areas to spend. It can be 1 or 2. There's nothing wrong with that. We can say, well, let's use all our revenue for the next 20 years or for the next 5 years, maybe to build dams, or to build airports, or to build railways, or to fix roads, to build critical roads, not the kind of roads we've been seeing around, roads that can stand test of time.
There is a need for the country to move away from the treatment of natural resource revenues as consumption income to now plowing them back into investments and treating them as capital that will earn some returns for the country. If we did that, and for instance invested the oil revenues in projects that have the propensity to create jobs, then of course the job creation becomes the net benefits beyond the development of the infrastructure and all the necessary ingredients that go into human development. So I think the time has come really to reduce the expenditure on recurrent items and increase the expenditure on capital items.
Do you also have a view on how Ghana's oil revenues could be better managed? Share your views with PIAC on the following channels. As we continue to debate Ghana's oil sector, may we continue to have the words of the late Professor Mills on the day he opened the first tap for first oil in Ghana.
Let us remember that those of us living now are trustees for the future generation. What are we going to leave the future generation?